So, what's your name exactly?
Dylan, yeah.
Dylan. Thank you for having us. It's our first time on Creative Mornings. I much rather prefer it was like if it was creative late morning or creative early afternoon. So the theme here is minimal, and I wanted to talk about from a creative aspect what does that mean in terms of being minimal? So, and what I've learned. So we only have 3 words, why and why not. So it's a short conversation, short little presentation. And I realized after I became a father, in some ways I became a better creative for some strange reason, and I thought hard about it. And I eventually realized that having children actually was the cause of it. So if you want to be creative, I highly recommend you to get one. Legitimately or illegitimately, get one, okay? These days, the models are slightly different. In the past, you had models that were like seen but not heard. You don't get those models anymore. Now you get the models where are pain in the ass, a bit lippy, but eventually it'll all pay out and pay off, right? When they move out and they pay rent, and it'll be okay. All that pain will come to pass. So why and why not? That was an interesting kind of journey for me. How, as I thought, how I became more creative and how I summarized that journey. And a lot of it is because of when you're a child, you're inherently, latently creative. And you watch and you understand their questioning and their thought process, they always start with why, right? So you say, you can't do this, why? Because why? Because granddad said that, why? Because granddad told me, and why? And the interrogation actually forces you to think and be more creative and come up with more bullshit reasons. But eventually you come at a source of truth, or at least at a place where it's quite different. And then you see their mind switch. Then they come up with a solution and go, well, have you thought maybe man can fly? And then they use this hovercraft thing, and then they strap it on, then they use the magnetic field, and then they float around. So as an adult, you go like, no, it can't be done, no one's done that. Then they'll go, why not? Why not? And then, so you get this double irritating kind of loop where you go through the why, and then you have to go through the why not. And you realize the why is the questioning bit. The why not is that little bit of unreasonableness. Because if you want to do something really fresh and new, it has to be unreasonable. It has to challenge and break the boundaries and the conventions and what has never been done before. And you might arrive at a place where why not? And you go, actually, I have no answer. And then you go, actually, maybe that's a good place to be. So very simply, that was the thought process that I thought was what my kids put us through, right? And when some of you are too young to even think about parenting, but next time when you are, you'll understand it, you know? And we'll talk about it more later in terms of how Singapore plays this out as from a societal point of view. But let me give you a real-life demonstration. This is what we do at home. We play this game. We play many games. So this game is called, what is it?
Bedtime stories.
Okay, we call it bedtime stories. So every night when they're bored and they want, oh, dad tell us a story, or mom tell us a story, and we play this game where it's a different bedtime story each time. So this is how it goes. So we'll play this game live so you get the idea of how this goes. Do you want to start or I start?
You start.
Okay, once upon a time there was a tissue paper.
But the tissue paper got wet and tore.
And then when it tore, a little bit of its soul escaped into the heavens.
And it became toilet paper.
But it started off very white.
But after that, it wasn't brown, but blue.
But blue. It was blue with envy. What was it envious about?
I was envious about the desk paper.
The test paper. This is subliminal. So as you play the games, you can tell where the he's having his PSLE this year. So you can see where the subliminal Freudian slips are coming out. In particular, he was envious of the math paper. In particular, the percentage and fractions section.
But one day, someone erased everything that was on the maths paper.
And the maths paper became no more. He was like everyone else. He was nothing. He had no memory. And he became ordinary.
Then he folded himself into a paper airplane and flew out the window.
To escape, to explore the world. And then he flew all around the world. And then he landed in Jakarta, in Indonesia, around this time when they're about to burn the palm oil trees and the haze, right?
So one day he came across a storm.
And he said to the storm, "Why don't you follow me? I'll lead the way."
So he brought the storm all the way to Malaysia.
Okay. But then, and this is more current affairs, so I don't know whether you know. So, but then before it entered Malaysia, it had to prove that it was a Muslim storm. Because, Malaysia has been sticky about things like that lately.
But then actually it was a Chinese storm.
How do you know it was a Chinese storm?
Why not?
Okay, so that's just a sample game. So you arrive at a different place every time. And for a lot of adults, you see this game and you think, oh, it's creative, it's fun. But if you think and you interrogate why are we playing this game, and I'll ask Dylan, and it will take you to a different place. We're playing this game at a superficial level. You go, maybe it's creativity, is to loosen the child up, get him to be a bit more self-confident, etc., etc. But what do you think you learned from this game?
When life gives you something, you make the best you can out of it.
So part of this game, the rules, there's only one rule in this game, which is you cannot say no. So whatever I say, he has to build on it. So to him, the lesson in life is life throws you stuff that you can't say no to, you make the best out of it. And that's the bigger value that you want our children to inculcate. And that's probably the biggest value or the biggest economic value of creativity. That whatever happens, lateral thinking will find a solution for you. Okay? So my pet peeve currently is he's going through his PSLE. I'm not one of those where my wife and I, we're not one of those parents where we demand that he gets 100, do we?
Thank goodness.
It's quite fortunate. He tells us horror stories about some of his students who get, like good marks, but the parents are not happy about it. So we want him to pass, get into the same school so that he doesn't go to a different school and then, start all over again. But then we understand the system is a system. So my pet peeve at the moment was he's going through his PSLE. We spoke to the English teacher, not the English teacher. Let me be clear, not the English teacher's fault. It's just the system. So he's got English composition, and one of the things he has is a picture of like in the last test was a picture of a boy screaming in a canteen, right? Drawing. So you have to write a story. What do you write about?
I wrote he like spilled hot soup on himself and he started screaming and running.
Right. So when I read that, I got like, this is shit, come on. You can do far better. I was like, why are you writing it? Because you've just seen the game we played. You can take it anywhere. Just give him a very boring kind of situation, we can turn it into an interesting one. So then he told me, he said, no, the teacher said you have to write logically. So we had parent-teacher meeting. I asked the teacher politely, I said, why did you say these things? Why must he write logically? She goes, for PSLE, you are scored on grammar, structure, composition. So I said, but with 300 kids in the school taking the PSLE, with that picture, you get the usual stories. Spilled soup, a ball came and hit me on the head, and then hot coffee spilled, something, and then I'm crying or some. So it's always the same storylines. So she said, yeah, we're not marking on originality. It's more components. So we told the boys, or the kids in the school, no ghosts, no aliens, no imaginary friends. Keep it logical. So coming from when I was working in my old industry, I reward the idea that stood out from 300 submissions. That's my thing. So it's very alien to me that you're looking for conformity. So she goes, yeah, but that's the system. That's how it's geared. So kids all learn to game the system. So I asked her a question. I go, the issue I have now, and you have to, as a teacher, help me work around this system because this is my ultimate goal. My belief is that for one so young at 12, when they're at their most imaginative, and let's face it, which story that they're reading isn't about ghosts, about fork and spoon running away and a cow jumping over a moon, about fairies living in an enchanted tree, about doll houses made out completely of chocolates, and the biggest fairy tale of it all is a beautiful princess who sleeps for 100 years, has no bad breath, and a handsome prince will wake her up. Those are all fantasy. So for a 12-year-old, you're killing that innate natural ability to think creatively now for conformity, for grammar, for logic. Because when he's 20 and the world has changed, don't forget our education system is gearing you for a job that does not exist yet, okay? So when he's 20, he's in this completely new world. You train to be an architect and then you know what? Everyone's an architect, just like everyone's a photographer now. Who has a smartphone? You're a photographer, You got Instagram, you're a photographer. So he'll realize that everyone's an architect as well. Then he'll have to resort and rely on creativity or lateral thinking to solve and get him ahead. You can't tell a 20-year-old to turn it on already when you've just rinsed it out from them. You can tell a 20-year-old that your grammar sucks. Can you go brush it up? You can tell a 20-year-old that your thought process is not as clear, but this is how. But you can't go and take a course on creativity at 20 and expect it to come and flow and course through your veins. So for me, for my children, they're at the age where I have to work around the system. I have to go why and why not. I have to go, how can he at home keep this and segregate in his mind that this is what's needed, but in school, the system is the system. Unless I take him out and homeschool, right? Which is not a thought that my wife and I are contemplating because it's a lot of hard work after that. So we just have to just understand that, again, this whole game of life throws you this set of circumstances and consequences and parameters. We'll just have to work around it. So in our own little way, we're working around the system that Singapore has. So if you have children, think about it. The other day we just hosted, we had a little lesson with two parents with daughters and sons, where we conducted a short session like this on creativity for an hour and a half. In our apartment, which has a rooftop, we have a rooftop farm as well. A small little farm where we grow our vegetables.
And a dog.
And a dog that fertilizes the vegetables. And he occasionally, when you're not looking in the middle of the night, he's up there fertilizing the vegetables.
He does it more than me.
So it was interesting as well, because they were in our, not in the same school, but in the same system. But you can see when they started playing a simple game like that, the children were so much better. And that lesson that we had, like, it's not really a tuition or anything. It was more for the benefit of the adults. Because the adults are the ones who are stifling the latent creativity. Their initial, we're all skeptical, cynical, old farts, right? And your initial temptation is to use the word no. And for the kids, no is not the word they want to hear. Everything to them is a world of possibilities and yes. So once we go through that few sessions where we're playing, you see the adults getting better and the adults accepting, say, what was that story? The ballerina on top of the mountains, and then they started doing the
tornado, and it
pirouettes.
pushed the
And then
aliens
they
away.
created a tornado to push
Aliens.
the aliens down and all. So that came from very staid kind of what you call systems where the kids have not been encouraged to think this way. But once it's naturally in them. Once you release it, it's there. All we have to do is just keep allowing it to come out. And it was a really interesting experience. It was interesting for him because we would imagine a father, son, daughter kind of course where the children are actively involved in also, I wouldn't say lecturing, but being part of the whole creative process and enabling other kids to think that way. So it's not impossible. It's just this whole thing that I've learned in this whole cycle of why and why not myself. So I left the corporate world and I thought about this. You go, when's the best time to retire? Society tells you 65 or CPF tells you 67, right? Can you guarantee you'll be alive at 67? You can't. Can you guarantee when you have your lump sum, you go, oh, I want to go skiing, that you are able to walk, or that you might not be you might be walking with the aid of a Zimmer frame. You can't. So at this point in my life, in my mid-40s, I decided to take a sort of sabbatical, and at this moment to live off your savings, and then enjoy the time with the kids, where you're young enough, where you can do the stuff that they want to do, and when you fall down, you don't need a hip replacement. And young enough that after 2 to 3 years, hopefully, as long as you keep abreast of things in your past industry and evolving and learning and acquiring new skills, you'll be as valuable or perhaps more valuable if you have to go back into the industry. Okay, so it kind of changes things, but in a lot of ways, you'll be thinking about it, go, it doesn't make sense, but when I applied his logic, why and why not, it kind of makes sense, you know? And then I love the thing about young kids when you see them that we lose as Singaporeans when we're put through the education system, the self-confidence, the like, why not? Let's go do it and let's see what happens. We lose that. We lose that because we think there's a 10-year series in life. You fill out the Cliff Notes in the 10-year series and you get this, you marry, and then whoo, life is all perfect. Life is as random as anything else. And if anything, it's helped understand from their perspective how simply a philosophy and a set of values like why and why not can help them deal with their life, can help me deal with my life. And I'm eternally grateful for my wife for having children and agreeing to have children willingly, and for having amnesia after having the first one. But you know, it really has been a great learning experience. I could have taken it the other way and actually gone back to work and then be miserable and say I have to work to feed them and clothe them and give them that kind of life. But actually, I don't know. My daughter is completely asleep now. Is she asleep? Okay. So at the end of it, I've started to adopt his thing. Why and why not? I've started to be a child again, in some ways. And the other thing about creativity that you need is a sense of innocence. Okay? You need a little bit of naivety to believe that it can happen. Right? And these qualities, I'm glad that he's brought it back out, and thankfully I was in an industry that kind of nurtured it. Eternally grateful to Dylan and Ava, and even more so, like I said, when they eventually do move out. And I hope if you walk away with anything, this is something you can apply in your everyday life, and when you have children, let them have it, let them keep it for as long as it's possible. Okay? Life has a way of wearing you down, so you don't have to press them down. Let them keep it for as long as you can. Before we end and we have maybe a Q&A, do you want, this is unprompted, but do you remember what you said to me when you were 6 years old? When you said, Dad?
Don't always say no. Let me live a little.
So when he was 6 years old, he said, Dad, don't always say no to me. Let me live a little. Let us all live a little. Thank you.
So let's have a Q&A session. Does anyone here have questions for this two gentlemen?
I'm wondering, you know, I work a lot with, my career has been working a lot with children and creativity, and one of the things that I run into, I mean, some components that are really important to me is curiosity,
Yeah.
and observing life around you, so that you can make up those stories based on human nature and the way people behave and stuff like that. And one of the things I run into is the amount of competition that creativity has with screen time. Computer screens, televisions, and smartphones. Do you put boundaries on screen time with your children?
Do we? Do you want to answer this since it affects you directly?
It does sometimes, but most of the time he combines both.
So you find
A balance.
middle ground.
So it depends on how you view or how the screen is used. So like you say, curiosity is a big thing. For me, it's also a big thing. In this day and age, so here's a question. In this day and age, if Thomas Edison was alive, how much more could he have invented because of Wikipedia, because of all the information that's floating out there? He would have invented a lot more. So we have to keep that alive. With him, in terms of screen, it's not sure. He plays the usual computer games like Minecraft. What else?
That's all.
Okay, that's all. So Minecraft. Then you limit a little bit of that, and then utilize the screen as a discovery, the iPad, the iPhone as a mode of discovery. So sometimes we recycle certain conversations or arguments that we might have had, disagreements. Then I go, you go Google, or why don't you find out? And then he finds out, and then we have that. Then the screen is used to encourage creativity.
When I work with actors, they are supposed to be creating characters based on what they observe in real life. And I say, if you're on the train and you're not observing what the people around you, if you're like this on your phone, how can you learn to assume some of those characters that are on that train with you and be a good actor, you know? And I just feel like the screen, I see kids all the time and they're on their phones all the time, and I'm thinking, wow, are you not looking around you and seeing what's going on around you, you know?
Well, that's what we say sometimes, right? When
Sometimes.
when you're in the car, we go look at what's around you and we're driving around. I think the best, I suppose the best way to answer that is when it comes to kids, our parents, my parents specifically, in the 60s and 70s, where they were more authoritarian, and the social structure was such that if your father said this, you do it. There's no questioning. There's more of a dialogue, so that was a more monologue kind of thing, and this is more of a dialogue now. We actually then have to go, I can't say no, don't just play the screen. With children, if you want them to stop eating hamburgers, you got to give them, you can't say, don't eat the hamburger. You go, hey, look at this chicken burger, it's fantastic, it's tasty. So you got to give them an alternative. So what we try to do is then, without the computer time, then let's play a game of observation of what's around you. So if we're in the subway, there's a couple that go, let's make up stories. So the same thing, and we'll play along. For children, encourage them to imitate and mimic, because mimicry is also, in the animal kingdom, is a sign of intelligence, right? So he comes back with stuff like, anyone from Hong Kong? Okay, so he does a Hong Kong accent quite well. I don't know where he comes from, so no, you know, he does Singlish, everything, but you want to try your...
Do the noodle with the pepper.
So he came back one day with this accent and then started rapping in Hongki. So you put the noodle in the pepper. So you encourage it as long as it's within, you know, you draw some limits. You go, okay, too far, you're stereotyping and you're being, you know, whatever. But it's good. I mean, the smartest animals in the animal kingdom is like the cuckoo bird. The cuckoo bird lays their eggs in other birds' nests and lets the other birds raise their young, which is what we should have done with you. Oh my God, we've been doing it wrong. It's not too late. Sorry. Okay.
Yes, I have another question from the floor.
Hi, I'm Zoe, and my question is pretty simple. I'm just curious, how do you guys end your bedtime stories game? Like, does it go on and on? Who decides to end it, or like?
Until you get, well, usually, who ends it?
We usually end it when we fall asleep. Like halfway when we're talking, we're like,
Usually when he hears snoring, that's the end of the game. Right? I would say that. But here's this interesting thing. He came up to me yesterday, and 2 days ago, and since we've been playing this game, he came up with a whole card game on bedtime stories. You know, so it's amazing. So he did. So we're playing it out to test out the prototype, so to speak. So now our next gig for the family is to try to create this game, right? Because I'm preparing again if the education system is based on the 20th century industrial model, where they value obedience and the ability to follow instructions more than lateral thinking and creativity, etc., etc. And we're living in the age of the collaboration and sharing economy. I've got to prepare him. So one of the ways we do that is if he has an idea like that, we go, okay, let's go produce it. You set aside a little bit of money to produce this, and it's important that he sees the process, understands the process, and there's no stigma to failure. My problem with him now is there's completely no stigma to failure. He's completely unaffected by failure. But he has a very positive spin, saying, oh, my maths, huh? Okay, good news, bad news. Bad news is I did fail my maths, okay? But good news
I improved by 24.
Huh?
I improved by 24.
I improved by 24 points. You know, so he packages it. I go like, yeah. Not hard to improve by 24 when you had how many?
20.
20 upon 100, so. But, you know, I love the ability to position it as a piece of good news. So back to the whole thing about doing that game out, then he learns, we all learn in the process of you know, this whole fail forward faster. So if it fails, no stigma, pack it up, what have we learned? Try something else. Okay, which is counterintuitive to the system that we're going through, which is a huge stigma. So as we're talking with, I met Grace in Austin, South by Southwest earlier this year. So, and you know, I worked in America for a few years. The thing about the Americans that are different from us is there's no stigma to failure. So you look at the VCs, the venture capitalists in America, if you pitch them an idea, they'll ask you how many times have you been doing this, and you go, how many times have you failed? And then you go, I failed 10 times. They value you higher because they think, I can trust you with my money because you've failed 10 times and you've learned the lessons. You come here in Singapore, you go, I failed 10 times, no one will touch you. You say, oh no, that means, oh, you failed. You know, and then they'll put money behind the guy who's never, this is the first time project, never failed before, but they think that's a better bet. You see, so the mindset shift is completely different. And I think in this era of the sharing, collaboration economy, we have to embrace that failure. We have to understand that it's part of the success. That if you fall down 5 times, get up 7 times. You know, what are the 2 words that one of the 2 words that I told you to remember in your life?
Get up.
Always get up. Okay, and that's going to be helpful. So one day you do 10 ideas, 1 will hit. But if our attitude is like the first one has to hit, it's like going out and dating for the first time, and the first person that you date is the one that you're going to marry. You know, that's the life of misery ahead of you.
Thank you. Let's throw our hands together for all of our champions and players.
Thank you.